So we came to the conclusion that the only way that Hashem could allow the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash is for improvement. You can only destroy something, halachically, if the intention is to produce, as a result, something which is even better. So that's what happened with the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, is that Hashem intends to have a greater, more beautiful, more powerful Beis HaMikdash in its place. And then we said it's not good enough just to say we're going to improve. The improvement has to begin immediately, because if there's a delay between the destruction and the improvement, then you've got destruction. And only later improvement, that doesn't count. And that's why we had that story of the Midrash, which effectively told us that on the same day the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, that is the same day that Moshiach was born, which means the process of rehabilitation began immediately. Now the truth is, we actually have precedent for this, because the very first time the Jewish people went through an experience of pain and slavery and exile was in Egypt. And we know that the story of Egypt was foretold, because long before they got to Egypt, Hashem had promised Abraham in what's called the Bris Ben Abasorim, the covenant that Hashem made with Abraham. So he told him that one day your children are going to be slaves in a foreign land, and they're going to be persecuted. But then, in the same sentence, and this is important, he says in the same sentence with the conjunction ve, and they'll end by going out with great wealth. That tells you that built into the system of the slavery was the opportunity for great wealth. And that sets the template for how all of these things work, that built into the particular challenge, the particular golus, the particular exile, is the growth that will come from it. They're not two separate things. Now the reality is, that's nice in theory. It's not how we experience life. I mean, I don't know about you, maybe you have a different experience, but that's not how we experience life. We experience the pain and the loss and the suffering. It's not like anybody's going to say, Tisha B'Av is actually a great day because it's the beginning of a great future. Well, no, Tisha B'Av is a fast day, and there are restrictions about how you behave during the course of Tisha B'Av that are not only about not eating. You can't wear leather shoes, and you're not allowed to do business, and you can't do leisure activities, and we don't greet each other, and we sit on a low chair, etc., which speaks to the truth of our experience. Our experience is that this is painful, this is difficult, and it feels like it's never ending. And it's all very well to tell me the philosophy and the theory and all the abstraction about how good things will be, but that's not what we experience. But that's our experience. Not everybody lives like we do. For example, you remember that story? I'm sure you've heard it before. So Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Haradok, who was a great sage, he was one of the students of the Maggid of Mezrich, one of the early Hasidic masters. He was sent by the Maggid of Mezrich to establish the Hasidic community in Israel. What are we talking here? In the 1700s. And one day he was sitting as he was. I think I told the story recently, actually. And somebody came screaming, yelling, very excited, Mashiach is here. So Rabbi Menachem Mendel didn't respond like everybody else who was going crazy and excited and whatever. He went to the window of his house, opened the window, took a deep breath, and he said, he's not here. And he went back to learning. So clearly he was able to determine if Mashiach is or isn't here. The only question is, why did he have to go to the window? If you have that kind of ability, surely you could do it from your desk as well. And the explanation that's given is because for a tzaddik, in his world, Mashiach is already here. And sometimes he just has to see the perspective of how it is from our world to realize, is it for real or not? So when we talk about this great theory that from the moment of the destruction, that's actually the first brick of construction, for us that doesn't seem real, but for a tzaddik, they actually see that unfolding, which means, firstly, and it's not such a foreign concept, because we, for example, might have a plan that nobody else can see, and when we're executing that plan, there might be other people around us who feel very insecure or anxious or even hurt by our plan, but because we can see the plan, so we're okay, and they'll see the bigger picture when we get there. So the tzaddik is kind of at that level. But what that means is, it's not just like some generic principle that a tzaddik knows or feels what it's like to be in the time of Mashiach even before we get there, because they have this insight that we don't have. It's more than that. It means that the tzaddik has the ability to see how far we are in the process. Right? Not just that generically Mashiach's coming and generically the world is good and everything's fine and you don't have to panic. The tzaddik sees the plan, which is a plan in stages. And the first day of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash was the first day of that plan unfolding. But you can imagine there's a point where you can say we're 10% there, 20% there, 30% there, etc. A tzaddik can see that. We can't. We just are going along for the ride blindly. So as a result of that, you have history, many occasions in history, where tzaddikim would say things like, this is the date that Mashiach is due. And then, of course, the date would come, and Mashiach, as we know, didn't arrive. And people would say, well, what did they mean? What are they saying? In fact, it's such a big topic, such a big issue, that the Gemara says, somebody who wants to predict the due date of Mashiach, let Hashem confuse their minds so they don't get the opportunity to try and share that kind of information. And the Rambam says the same thing, but the Rambam adds a perspective, which is it will cause disappointment. So if somebody had to tell you, for example, Mashiach is coming this weekend, and then you'd get all ready for Mashiach to come, and then if it, God forbid, does not come this weekend, the next time somebody tells you Mashiach's coming, you're going to say, I've heard that already. I've been there before, and you don't take it so seriously. So there are quite harsh statements in both the Gemara and the Rambam against trying to share a date when Mashiach is due, and yet we find some of the greatest people in our history did exactly that. And up until relatively contemporary times, this date is what we call a kates. It's a due date for Mashiach. So now you have to ask the question: did those tzaddikim not know that the Gemara says you're not supposed to do this? And the Rambam says you're not supposed to do this. And the Gemara says like a curse upon the head of somebody who does this. So why did they do it? And the answer is that if you're going to say Mashiach is coming on date X, and then you're incorrect, that's devastating. But if you can see that a certain phase of the unfolding of Mashiach will be reached on date X, then you have a responsibility to tell people, we're getting there. We're passing another milestone. So it's not saying that this is the date by which Mashiach has to arrive. We're saying at such and such a date, we're much closer to Mashiach. We'll have finished a chapter of the book. We'll have crossed a particular milestone. Like when you're running a marathon and you get to face poly shorts or whatever they call everything, and you say, we've made a particular breakthrough in terms of this marathon. So that's what the tzaddikim have to do for us, because we can't see what they could see, and we need that boost every once in a while to say, we're making progress, things are happening. Otherwise, we'd also become despondent 2,000 years down the line. Now that theme is embedded in the primary theme of this Shabbos. There are very few Shabbases of the year that have a name. Most Shabbases are referred to by the parasha. But there are few that have a name. Shabbos Shuvah, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Shabbos HaGadol, before Pesach. So this Shabbos is called Shabbos Chazoin. Why is it called Shabbos Chazoin? Because the Haftarah begins with that word, Chazoin. Chazoin Yeshayahu ben Amoitz. This is the vision of the prophet Isaiah. It's not a great vision. It's a vision all about that the Jews haven't behaved as they should, and they can expect, therefore, that, God forbid, the temple's going to be destroyed. And it wasn't just God forbid, it actually happened. Not a very positive Haftarah. In fact, the 3 Haftarahs leading up to Tisha B'Av, from the fast of the 17th of Tammuz until Tisha B'Av, are all on that theme. It's different prophets. The first 2 are Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, and now this one is Yeshaya. And they're busy berating the Jewish people for their wayward behavior and warning them of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Now, out of the 3, Chazoin is the harshest of the 3, which makes sense. It's immediately before Tisha B'Av. Like this year, it's actually just hours before Tisha B'Av. So it makes sense that out of the rebukes, this is going to be the harshest. Until the Hasidim get involved, because you know how it is. Hasidim always find an angle. So Hasidim get involved. There was a great Hasidic personality called Reb Hillel Paraja, who was a student of the second Rebbe of Chabad, the Mittler Rebbe, and then after that of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe. So Reb Hillel Paracha once quoted something he heard from Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, who was also a great Hasidic master. Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev used to say, and it's a pretty famous word, certainly if you hang around in Chabad, he used to say there's another meaning to the word chazoin. Chazoin means a vision. That means over the course of the Shabbos, Hashem shows us a vision of the third Beis HaMikdash. Whether you see it consciously or subconsciously, but there's a vision of the third Beis HaMikdash. Now, how do you reconcile the two? How can the same Shabbos be chazoin because it's all about rebuke and destruction, and the same Shabbos be chazoin because it's about a vision of a better future? How does that work? Well, that's exactly the point. We generally think of bad times and good times as separate from each other. It's like when a person, God forbid, hurts themselves. So what do they say? When I get better, I'll be able to drive again. I'll be able to write again. Be able to lift weights again, whatever it is. If a person, God forbid, is ill, they talk about when I recover, I'll be able to X and Y. So now's the bad patch, and afterwards will be the good patch. And what the Torah wants us to know from the Midrash that we spoke about, with the same word Aryeh being used to describe the destruction and the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash, as well as the other Midrash that we learned about the cow that made the noise and was an indication that today is the day of destruction and today is the day of the birth of Mashiach. And the story of how Hashem tells Abraham that this is a project. It's called slavery, but the goal of the project is that they'll emerge with great wealth, which, by the way, according to Hasidus, is not just the money and gold that they took out, but also the spirituality that they managed to extract that was buried somewhere in Egyptian society. And that obviously happened over time. That didn't happen only at the end. So the fundamental principle that this teaches us is that when Hashem destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, it was with the purpose of rebuilding something which is greater. From day one after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, that project began. We can't see it clearly, so what we see is the rebuke of Yeshaya. But at a deeper level, even our neshama, even though we're not tzaddikim, at a deeper level, our neshama can see in that destruction, it can see the third Beis HaMikdash being rebuilt. And that's the attitude we should take with us into Tisha B'Av. It's not just an attitude of the mourning and the restrictions, which obviously we have to observe because we have to observe halacha, but simultaneously to read into that this is a construction site on which the future Beis HaMikdash will be built, and we have crossed a lot of the key milestones of that construction. Please God, we hope and daven that this Tisha B'Av will be the time we put the finishing touches, and so we can actually see for ourselves what Hashem had in store all of these years.